Now, my book will explain in detail, I won't go into too much detail, but how come food is so cheap? So I go through each of the steps of each food industry, because you'll be surprised. And, I'll be frank, before I became plant-based, I was vegetarian predominantly. And then I became one of those clean food eaters, Oh, my fish came wild caught from Alaska, and my beef was, massaged by Japanese massage therapists, right? My eggs were from Taos, and Taos eggs are free range, and they sit by the fire and they play kumbaya, and this is what this is what we're sold, and all of this is like bad information, by the way. Okay, so my book will cover like pork right now, how the majority of pork in the United States, and now starting recently chicken, is grown here, shipped 7,000 miles to China, processed in China, shipped 7,000 miles back, and it's cheaper than it's ever been, ever. Now, you don't have to be an economist to figure out something is odd with that equation. The book will go and explain why. Farm-raised versus wild-caught. So we all think, oh, wild-caught, wild-caught, wild-caught. My book will explain how we can take now farm-raised fish, they're grown in tanks with antibiotics and pesticides, herbicides, and other animal parts and human parts and stuff like that. It's terrible. And, the flesh of the animal is like this darkish, grayish color. And now what they do, they can add a carotenoid that comes from shrimp shells, astaxanthin. You hear that the other day with Gabriel Cousins was talking about how we use that. Well, the industry uses these off shells of the shrimp, and they actually can put it as a natural dye into the tank, and it turns this brown flesh into pink. Okay? Then what they do is there's a machine that's at the side of this river that they're at, and it drops the fish, and it picks them up about 20 feet later, and now it's considered wild caught. This is what it is. And I would just be like, oh, it's wild caught, yeah. The marketing on the internet was really good. Even GMO fish. So the GMO salmon was introduced, right? And they blocked the labeling law, so now you can go get a wild-caught GMO salmon, which is, as you can see on the picture here, how big it is. We don't have any long-term studies on the genetic modification of an animal species that have been consumed by humans or what it's going to do to the environment when that has the effect itself on the environmental aspects. In my book, we'll cover things like meat glue. Right? So how do we get steak so cheap? When I was a kid, again, I used to go to a restaurant, and it'd be something very expensive. I'd look over the side, and we'd see someone eating a steak, and they were dressed really nice, and like, wow, we used to look like, wow, they must be, they're higher class. They were able to eat this, or they would go Ruth Chris Steakhouse and stuff like this. But now when you go to the steakhouses, you can get you can eat steak and shrimp for $7.99. How is that possible? Because we use things like meat glue. We get all the scraps of any of the meat products. We put this, it's an enzyme that comes from pig's blood and cow blood. We sprinkle it as a powder, we wrap it in cellophane, and then we refrigerate it 6 hours later. It becomes a nice log, and we chop it up in steaks and serve it. Same thing with chicken thighs, and same thing with pork products, okay? I won't cover the chicken today, I won't cover the beef, there's a lot of things, but even what we have here is modified atmospheric packaging. It's how they can take red meats now, like beef, ground beef, and then we actually put it in the cellophane packaging of using carbon dioxide or monoxide, which makes the blood of the tissue there more pink and red. So that's what we think of fresh. But it can keep the food after it's spoiled up to 2 weeks. Now the studies show up to 2 years. Right? So how many people are like, oh, I take this, I cook this, I got sick, I got diarrhea, I eat the same thing. Well, what is it, And people are not eating it raw, they're cooking it, right? So here's another example, and then we'll get on. But 5 billion burgers consumed, and then people are like, oh, I need my all-beef patty, Dr. Pai. All-beef patty. I used to be like, same thing, again, massage therapy. And the studies showed through the Annals of Diagnostic Pathology, this is a forensics journal, medical journal, that they took and analyzed the meat content in the top 8 fast food chains, and they found it basically had between 2 and 14%. That means 85% to 98% of your all-beef patty is not meat. Shocking, right? So what that means, if you had 2 quarter-pounder cheeseburgers, that's 5 grams of meat protein, which is 5 paper clips worth. Right? So you have to really start thinking like, well, why are we so sick? Because when you were children and you ate this food, you didn't get sick. We didn't get obese, and we didn't have all these inflammatory conditions, because your food is not what it is, right? It can't be cheaper than, when I was a kid, a piece of bacon or something that was added was more expensive. You had to pay $1 or $2 extra. And now it's like you're getting 3 patties with 6 pieces of bacon for $1, right? Even my book will cover the hot dog report. The hot dog report is something that everybody should be shocked about, because everybody's like, oh, I have ballpark, or this is kosher. One thing that you need to know, whether it's a animal product or even a veggie dog, because they all have to be processed in the same facility to make hot dogs, is that the studies show that across like 12 top major brands that you get at the health food store and at the supermarket, it contains 2% of human DNA. That's not a side little chili finger. That's actually an ingredient now. So you got to think of, like, for those who are older here, Soylent Green, and for those who are younger, Cloud Atlas, and that will give you some ideas. So what does this get us? 1 out of 4 people get sick, 328,000 people go to the hospital, 23,000 Americans die from eating food in America. I'm not talking about some third world, fourth world country. I'm talking about the United States here. 100% of store meat now contains, by USDA reports and consumer groups, 100% of that has bacteria in it, E. coli, salmonella. So that's why if you eat this stuff, you gotta make sure it's cooked. Okay. Some of it has cysts and parasites. Some of them have ammonia from the pink slime and the washing of that. If you don't know what that is, don't look that up before you go eat tonight. Meat now contains 2 to 5 antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So there's another doctor probably talking this week talking about superbugs and resistant things. This is a huge problem, people. Because people now, there's some people who've never taken antibiotics, they get sick, they go to the hospital, and now we give them all these things that doesn't work. It's because the food has been given the antibiotics over and over and over again. And remember, infections that are like E. coli and those things come from inside of the animal's gut. Vegetables do not have E. coli. They don't have listeria. They don't have salmonella. The contamination comes from a factory farm, or a CAFO as we call them, and that actually spills down the water stream. Right now, just a couple of days ago, this administration, I'm going to get political, but they passed a bill to remove the Clean Water Act, right, which protects our rivers and our streams and our lakes. So now we can dump these things. And so if you're an organic farmer and you're growing your vegetables and this comes onto your property and you didn't take it to the market, people will get sick.